Now, if you have one or more older motorcycles in your collection, I have two that are 40 years plus old, you may need to change some tires with tubes, and it's a little bit different than changing modern sport bike tires. We're going to demonstrate how I use the Baha no pinch method to avoid pinching the tube. It's worked well for me over the years. I've done quite a few of these tires, and I've learned a lot of little tips, especially some that are unique to the RD400, of taking a bike apart, putting it back together, some things that may make it a lot easier or at least be entertaining. But it is a little more challenging to change in tires on older bikes, and it seems like the older they are, the more challenging it is. Now, today's shop project, we're going to change out the rear tire on the RD. It's a tube tire, a little bit different than the tires we normally swap out on the modern bikes. Even though on my GS, I'm not sure, and I've heard it both ways, that you shouldn't be using tubeless tires. You should be, it's okay. I've heard it both ways. I don't recommend anything, but I have used the Commander Michelin tires on the GS for many, many years now. On the RD, you have to use a tube. Maybe some people have some way of doing it with using modern tires. I don't know. I'm going to stick with the tried and true method of trying not to pinch the tube, and we'll show how we do that today. So the first job, as always, in this small garage with a lot of motorcycles, we want to move everything around so we can get the bike where it'll be convenient to work on it. Now, to replace that rear tire, you need room on both sides of the bike and in the back. And in my case, the method I'm going to show requires having a come along, although there are other methods, like removing the back fender. So I'm trying not to leave out any steps. The first thing would be, of course, to loosen and remove the axle nut. There's also a larger nut that holds on the stay for the brake caliper. And I guess you could get away with not loosening it. I loosen it and take the nut off anyway while I'm working on this, just to get it out of the way. The brake caliper itself, the lower bolt comes right out, but the top one you have to rotate the caliper upward, catch the pucks as they fall out. They're just held in there by two little tangs. It can be a little tricky, and getting it back on can be a little intimidating if you're not familiar working with brake calipers. And the other thing is I try to take a zip tie, and this is a really good tip. Get the caliper up out of the way. It just bangs around during the whole process here. I just always like to get the brake caliper up out of the way. Push the axle through. In a perfect world, it comes right out without too many bangs and tongs. I loosen up the chain adjusters. We're going to have to readjust the chain, of course, when we're done. Pull the axle out. That frees up the back wheel. But the first thing, and this can be really tricky, right now at this point, sometimes if the chain is in its far forward position, which this is because it's a relatively new chain, getting a chain out can be a little tedious, and sometimes you have to pull a swing arm away or wiggle it back and forth, or it can be challenging. Now, these older bikes, they're not made for quick maintenance like some of the newer bikes, but everything on them is doable. Now, I like to use the come along rather than take the back fender off or take whatever other parts you need to take off. It's more convenient for me. I have two come alongs in the garage. To get the back wheel off, you've got to have it a lot higher off the ground than the center stand allows to make it convenient. Or again, you have to take the back fender off. Now, this gets to be a little tricky as you start trying to take this wheel out, and there's a bolt on the bottom of the caliper that holds the caliper from rotating that gets in the way. You can take that out right away. That makes it easier. There's an awful lot of little things, and you got to wiggle and woggle and do gyrations. But the point is, it does come out. But it really is, they never, at Yamaha, I don't think they spent a lot of time trying to make this an easy change wheel. As an example, an R1 wheel or an MT09 wheel, you can have it off in a couple of minutes. This, you've got to plan the day out a little bit on this. But older bikes, that's the charm of older bikes. They tease you and torture you when you have a love-hate relationship. But at the end, when you get it done, it's very, very satisfying. It's always my habit, anytime I have anything apart, to clean inside all the areas you normally can't get your rag and wax and everything into. Get it as clean as possible. Clean up the wheel before we actually work on it. Simple green is a good solution for this, and any kind of a microfiber that you're not going to use over and over again.
Well, I thought for sure you fish were going to help me change this tire, but looks like I'm on my own as always.
Now, using a removal tool, take out the Schrader valve from the tube, and that's a pretty straightforward thing, same as if you had a no tube tire. But remember, it is a tube, and you see the nut holding it on. You've got to move that, get that nut off before you go to the next step. That has to be free, and I keep all the parts, just came off. Now with a tube, again, that nut, once it's removed, a lot of times you'll notice, and these tires have been in there for several years, there's corrosion and it doesn't want to come right out. Now you can't remove the tire conveniently with that not inside the tire. So I put a couple of drops of WD-40 on it, and then while that's soaking in, I let some ordinary Windex soak around the rim. And this, by the way, is a great tip. No matter what kind of tires you're mounting, tubeless, and anything, Windex is the best choice for me, something I always have in the house. That makes it a lot easier. I'm using the Motion Pro bead breaker. It's about a $50 tool. It works real well. I have the Harbor Freight one too. That seems to work okay. This one does a real nice job, and I don't know why this tire just popped right. It was almost no effort to get it off. I was really surprised at that, because this tire has been on there for quite a few years. And sometimes, and you never know when you're going to get it, one that's really difficult to get off. But when you do, heat and Windex are your two best friends. And eventually this just came right off, and I was really surprised. Even when I flipped it over and did the other side, it just came right off. Now, but that's not the case all the time, and sometimes you have to fight, and that's motorcycling, I guess. And older motorcycles always have these challenging little things that are difficult to do, but none of them are impossible. They're difficult, but not impossible. And here on the first break, the first part, double tooling it the way they do that. And by the way, these tools, the bead breaker, they're useful for tire irons too, when you go to take the tire off or put the tire on. The Motion Pro thing, I've made a separate dedicated video of how to use it on my channel. You just put my name in quotation marks and Motion Pro bead breaker, and that video will come up. And that's a real handy thing. I've used it over and over in the shop many, many times. Now another handy little tool that I have, the Motion Pro rim protectors, minimizes the amount of scratches you put on a rim while you're doing this kind of work. And by the way, I mentioned already, you can use as tire irons, you can use the tool, the bead breaker tool, handy thing. And it's a real nice long lever arm too. And I really carefully take the tube out. Here's the reason. If I pinch the tube, I want to have this as my spare tube. And getting this off, if you don't have those rim protectors, you can really chew up the rim pretty bad. But I always go in and clean up the area where the tire is going to mount. I just want to get all the old oxidation off as much as I can. It only takes a few minutes on the wheel. I want to have the wheel all prepped up and ready for mounting the tire. These Sport Demon Pirelli tires are extremely hard carcass tires, and like many of the other Pirellis, like the Angels, they are relatively difficult to mount relative to Michelin's, but they are good tires. Now just for reference, this tire took a long time, I think almost 2 months to get, and we got the last one. Vlad was able to get the last one. It is a Sport Demon RD size, and it's been extremely hard to get the sizes that we wanted. I know they give you a free gift here, something else I don't need. But, we got the tube, that's an important thing. And I don't want to reuse the tube if I don't have to, unless I pinch this, and if I do, maybe I'll just go get another one. But anyway, having this, yeah, we got it all. Okay. This is, in the old days, you could just go down and get a tire. Well, those days are gone. And you got to plan a year ahead of time when you need tires. And this is one that we waited for. So let me get all the cardboard out of here and get ready to mount this baby up. Now, I guess I'm spoiled from mounting Michelin tires, especially the modern ones, the 5s and They go on the rims by themselves. But anyway, this is for this bike. The Sport Demon has proven to be a good tire, and I've gotten good mileage from it. Of course, I want to use the Baha no pinch tool. Chuck donated this to our cause. It's basically something I think that's made for dirt bikes originally, but I have on my video channel, I have a dedicated video of how to use it, and it works to perfection. It works exactly as they say it does, and it's easy to use. Maybe the first time you put it together, it can be a little confusing, but as soon as you see how easy it works, once it's all the bolts are in place, and it's fully adjustable. I think you can use it even on a 21-inch rim, and it really is nicely made. And again, I've had the tire lube, the Nomar tire lube. Now the Nomar, the lube works great, but if you don't have the lube, Dawn soap dish detergent seems to work well too. And as like I say with everything about motorcycling, there's more than one way to do it. All we try to do is show the way that we do here in the shop, and it seems to work for us. Now the method that seems to work for me is put a very small amount of air in the tube, and not too much. I don't know, I don't measure it, I just know how much it is by touching it. And get the tire tucked in, get the valve lined up with the red dot, so you know which side is going to go, where it's going to go. That'll help the balance if you do that. And tucking that tube in carefully, of course. And I don't wear any sharp rings or anything that might damage it, but getting it put in place. And at some point in time, if you're very careful, you'll have the valve where the red dot, which is where the valve is supposed to go on Pirelli tires. Get it tucked in to make sure there's no wrinkles in it. And it just needs to have now a couple of pounds of air. All it needs is 2 pounds of air. I don't know how much it is. I don't even think it's important, but you've got to have it sitting like that. And when you're all done, this is the whole thing, is now to get that valve into the hole in the rim is the tricky part of the whole job. Sometimes you need little baby fingers, and sometimes it can really be challenging. Now, a good tip that's really helpful when you have the tire and tube off, put a little countersink, little radius on the entry point where that valve is going to go in. It helps line it up. And you can see here, it's a little bit of a challenging thing to get it to exactly right. You can use needle nose pliers, but you got to be careful not to booger up the threads. And it's tricky. It's just one of the things that makes this changing a tube tire just a little trickier. And because this is a stiff carcass tire, it makes it even more difficult. A soft carcass tire, like a dirt bike tire, would make this a lot easier. Getting the nut on helps. Once you can get a couple of threads on. Now here, the nut is on, and now I assemble a tool. And again, at the end of this video, I'm going to put the whole link, or I'll put the whole video on the end. It's a short video of doing the tube tires, the tubeless tires, I'm sorry. This is a tube tire. It seemed to work. This is the lower part going on. It's exactly as advertised. It went right on. And there is a little tool that keeps the opposite side from sliding back. I don't have that tool though. But even without it, you can do it. You can pretty much figure it out. And again, I'll have that other tool next time I change tires. That little, just the thing that keeps the other side from slipping back on. But even without it, you can get by everything here right at the very end. And you just, this is where you be careful not to scratch, put any kind of a gouge in the rim. You don't have to. And usually it goes right on beautifully. Now, the first time you do a tubeless tire and you do the leak test and you see bubbles, you think, oh, it's the problem. Well, when you do a tube tire, guaranteed there'll be bubbles because there is some residual air in there. You have to kind of wait it out, just constantly put more Windex on, look for bubbles, wipe it off. Eventually, there'll be no bubbles because you've removed all the air that's between the tube and the tire, and that's perfectly normal. But at the end of it, I would want to do another leak down test, say 15-20 minutes later. Now, the initial test on a balancer was we're in really pretty close balance here. And the modern tires, the new ones that I've been getting, they're usually pretty good. Every once in a while you get a bad one. Not very often though. And the Michelins seem to be the best of all, but even the Pirellis, they mount up a little harder and they seem to balance real well when you're done. And it's the quality of the tires. So we know the tire balanced real well. It mounted up relatively easy. That no pinch tool, and again, I'll put that at the end of the video. I think there's some good information on there for people mounting even tubeless tires. That thing works great. And here's the whole thing. There's a lot of ways to mount tires. This is only one way. I'm sure there are people that have their own tire machines. I've shown at least 10 different methods on my channel, a way to mount and do the thing that we're doing today. But today, this one is dedicated to tube tires and older bikes that have quirks. And an RD 400, when you go to put this all back together, you quickly realize there's quirks. So if this is the first time you've ever worked on an RD, you notice right away, if you didn't have this up on a come-along, you would not be able to slide the tire in. You have to get the back wheel up off the ground. Choice 2 is you can take one of the mufflers off, and I've heard you can do it, but I don't do it that way. Or you can take that whole back piece of the bike with the fender and the tail light off, or loosen it. But I haven't had to do that because I have a come-along. Now, the trick is to get the bike high enough that you've got clearance on everything. The height is what's important. Once you get the bike, now you can lower the bike down a little bit, and now you've got to get the chain in place. And a lot of times, this gets really tricky. The clearance between things, when one side has clearance, the other side doesn't. What'll help, a good tip, put some wheel bearing grease. Both sides have spacers on them. And that bolt right there that holds the brake stay, if you take that bolt out, it'll make your life a lot easier. You'll just have more clearance to wiggle a wheel around. And it's a very easy thing. It has a cotter pin on it. It just makes the job easy. And that's one of the things, if you don't realize these little things you can do to make it easy, I leave the big heavy nut, just leave it loose on there. It holds it in place. If not, it flops around all over the place. So the rest of the project, putting the parts back together, adjusting the chain, putting the axle nut on, all of that relatively straightforward maintenance that you would normally do, adjusting the chain, getting the axle to go through. A lot of times that can be difficult. If you don't have a helper, it's really difficult sometimes. Getting the axle nut on. This is all just reversing everything that we did in the beginning, putting a nut, and don't forget that nut or you'll have no brakes. Or you'll have brakes one time. Getting that all tightened in and socked in. And while I'm down there, I was very careful. I took a rag with some kerosene on it, cleaned up some of the residual goop that's on the bottom of the bike that nobody ever sees, but I don't like having it down there. Tighten up the axle, that's for sure. There's the big nut that holds the brake stay, and also the nut that holds the axle, and the bolts that hold the caliper on. The top one, you put the top one in first, rotate it down, and put the bottom one in. Tighten them down to factory specs with a torque wrench. And here's the final thing. And when you put that cotter pin in, boy, does that feel good. You know, you're ready to go then, pretty much ready to go. Anyway, the rain stopped. This was a rainy day. And I had moved all the bikes around, and now the joy is take it out. So this job can be just a little trickier than working on a modern bike. Modern bikes seem to come apart a little easier. The older bikes seem to have more things to move around. But I've had, because I've done this several times, I hope I've been able to pass on and that I haven't forgotten any of the little tricks and tips and things that I've learned. But always keep in mind, and it's always true about a lot of things in motorcycling, there's a lot of ways to do this. There's a lot of ways to paint. There's a lot of ways to work on things. Everybody's got their own little ups and downs and tricks to share. I can only share the ones I know, and the ones that make changing a tire on an RD 400, it's certainly not a 2-minute job, but nothing out of the realm of an average mechanic with a lot of patience. But it's done, and we're ready for another 10,000 fun miles on that back tire. So what I'm going to do, I'm tacking it on to the end of this video, is the original video that shows how to do tubeless tires with the Baha no pinch. It's the original video I posted, I don't know, a while ago, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And we've had a lot of good responses to it, and a lot of people have thanked me for posting it. Now, there's a lot of other people that have posted these Baha no pinch. Check them all out, but basically it's good quality information. So today's video is about using the Baha no pinch tire tool to mount tires. Now I've seen videos, and many of them, good ones on YouTube, about mounting dirt bike tires. I did not see any about mounting sport bike tires. Maybe I just missed them. But this is a tool that makes it relatively easy to mount a tire without scratching the rim. I wanted to try it. Chuck, a great dirt bike rider from our area, gave me the tool after I restored an old OSA for him. And it's shame on me. It took me this long to actually get around to using it. But after this day's experience, I'm sorry I didn't use it earlier. It's really a good tool, and it works pretty good. Now, in today's video, we're going to try to demonstrate or use or experiment with, I'm not sure yet, and I'll explain why in 1 minute, the Baha no pinch tire mount. Now, I know this is made for dirt bikes. I've seen videos of how successful it is to use on dirt bikes. I wanted to try it on one of the sport bike tires, but I didn't want to try it on a modern sport bike. I was saving it for when I had to change the tire for this. I have a spare set of wheels. I'm going to change the rear tire today with it. For one reason, the tires that I use on this bike, and they are Sport Demon Pirellis, are usually very, very difficult to mount. Not like the modern Michelin, the Michelin 5s almost jump on the rim by themselves. These are difficult to mount, and the older bikes, the GS and any of the bikes with thinner, narrower rims tend to be a little more difficult to get everything sorted out so you can get an easy mount without a tire machine. I wanted to try this. This was donated by Chuck. I had done some work on his OSA, a classic bike, and did a little restoration paint work, and he gave me this. I haven't used it, and it's been a while. So today's the day we're going to try to use it, and we're trying to use it on the rear tire for this bike, which we've been waiting to wear the tire out, really. It's ready for a tire. Now, if you're a backyard mechanic like I am, and you mount your own tires, which I do, one of the purposes of mounting your own tires, one of the reasons I like to do it, I paint all my rims. All the bikes in my collection have painted rims, and I don't want to scratch them. And in past, every method I've used, and I've demonstrated on my channel that has over 2,000 videos, I've shown every method I know of to mount the tire. Zip ties, duct tape, Gorilla tape, mounting it with the normal spoons as an example. But I've never used the Baha tool, and I don't know if this is going to work. Maybe it's not going to work the way I plan on these type of tires, but I'm not going to know until I try it. And if it does work, I'll try to pass that information on. If you see it's a struggle, you'll know maybe it's only going to be good for dirt bikes. In about 2 hours, we're going to know. So to be fair, I just want to mention things that I've learned over many years of mounting tires, all different brands. Dirt bike tires tend to mount up relatively easy. Well, the tires are softer, the carcass is softer. Modern sport bike tires like the Michelin 5s that I've mounted these to in the last few months, they are very easy to mount on the wider rims. When it comes to the older bikes with narrower rims, a little more challenging. I did the custom wheels on the GS, and I used extreme care in mounting them so that I would not scratch those rims. I have a lot of hours invested in rims. One of the things in my small bike collection is almost every bike here has custom rims, and I don't like to see scratches on them. Now, if this tool works out well, we're going to be due for a set of tires on the RD very soon. And since the RD has tubes, that'll give us another chance just to experiment with the tool and see what the good side, bad side, how it works or how it doesn't work. Now, in the past, when I've mounted these, the Sport Demon tires are relatively hard carcass. They're a soft compound. In my case, they wear out a little bit faster than other tires that I've tried, like the Bridgestones. But I like the grip, and I do like the way the bike handles with them when they're new. As soon as they get squared off, then it's time to change the tires. And I have a set, what makes this possible, and very convenient, I have a set of spare rims. So when I want to change it, I usually do it in a 2-day thing. I'll change the tire on the rim, and then the next time when that tire is on the last ride it's ever going to be on, and maybe we're already at that point, then I just have a very quick job of flipping a rim. And right now it's, well, I have the one set of black rims on the front, the green rims on the back, so getting a black rim on the back, I'd like to do that as soon as possible. Now the first thing I want to do before I do anything else is get the rim half clean, and I don't want to just be working with dirty parts any dirtier than I have to. Takes a minute or two, then we'll be working with some clean parts, just make it a little bit nicer. Get all the dust off. This has been sitting up on the shelf probably for a couple of years. Now a lot of people, just truth in advertising, a lot of people I noticed when I looked at the tire, this tire is squared off. It is not worn out. You probably, other people would get another 1,000 miles out of it, but what happens, the handling gets wonky. And I don't like, and I don't enjoy riding a bike with it. When you go into a turn, it starts to fall in. I just don't enjoy that. So to me, it's worth the little extra money to have fresh tires on a bike. Also, the rubber is softer. Once the rubber gets a couple of years old, the rubber gets a little harder, and you tend to lose ultimate traction from time to time. So for me, this is a good investment. Not everybody's going to want to change out the tires this early in the program, but hey, this tires are the whole thing for me. When you're leaning a bike and you throw it into a corner, the one thing that's either going to work or not work is the tires. You can have all the horsepower you want. The bike is not fun to ride if the tires are substandard. So step one is using a valve removal tool. We're going to take and by the way, we have Curvy Girl valve stems, offset valve stems. We've got a video on how to install them. In fact, we did one just recently. And I highly recommend anybody changing a tire, change out the valve stems to 90 degrees. Just makes it more convenient and easier to check the air in the tire. There we go. Once that's done, we put this aside until we have the new tire mounted. Okay, this is the tool that I'm going to use to break the bead. I have 2 bead breakers. I have the Harbor Freight one. Lately I've been using this one. I've been trying to use it on all different types and styles of rims. So far it's been pretty good on everything I've used it on. And it's about a $50 Motion Pro tool. Now a couple of tips that'll make any tire changing easier. Any tire change, the biggest single thing you could do to make this whole job easier is get the tire warm, especially the new tire that you're going to mount. In this case it's about 70 degrees. And it's not a sunny day, so I can't put it out in the sun with any good luck. But this would be, the warmer I can make this tire. If I'm in sunny California or Florida, and I could lay this out in the sun, flip it over, let it sit out in the sun. If you have a black mat or black driveway, it'll make this part of the job so much easier. And it'll make the whole job easier. Heat is your friend. Now here's another tip that works well for me. I've been doing this in the last 4 or 5 tire changes. Before I go to break the bead, and of course this is really just to make it a little bit easier, a little Windex, a little soapy water. I don't think it really matters if you mix Dawn and water. It's the soap in there that does what we want it to do. Now if I were to use the Harbor Freight bead breaker, I just push that down. But the thing with the Harbor Freight bead breaker, or any of the bead breakers, I don't want to take a chance on scratching anything, that if I can possibly help it. So this is going to just, what's going to happen, as soon as I break the bead, that fluid is capillary, it's going to run down in there so that it doesn't come back up and stick. Because using this Motion Pro, I have to move this and make it go around and around like a clock to get one side broken. But having that little extra Windex in there is a big help. So the most important thing is to get as far in as you possibly can. Take the second part of the tool, it fits right in there. And usually, if you're real careful, and I'm trying not to scratch your rim, you can break that. Now what's going to happen, that Windex flows down in there, and it doesn't let it come up and stick. And if you hold it there long enough, now see what I'm doing? I'm holding it. Now I can press the rest, and I wanted to show this in real time, of course. Now I don't know if it's all lucky day, this will work. I could pull this around and I could break the whole bead now in one shot. Now the Motion Pro tool, I have not been able to do that on some rims, but it looks like this one it is. Now what made that possible is having that Windex on there, and that is a great tip. Just makes it a lot easier. If you're a subscriber to the channel, you know the last tires I mounted, I had to go around. Well, maybe it's my lucky day. Now again, that Windex is a really good trick, and I'm not sure who invented it, but it works. Now, again, the Motion Pro, the whole thing with this is to get the first one started. And sometimes you have to be a little careful not to let it slip. Sometimes you can get it to go down quite a bit. Put the second part of the tool in. By squeezing this, what you have here is a leverage of 1,000 or something. And you can see, if you're real careful, now let me get that out. Let's see if I can do this twice in one day. It'll be my lucky day. Oh, see, that Windex does the trick. Now, I haven't tried, to be honest, I haven't tried any other lubricants. I know Dawn and water would do it too. This makes it pretty easy though. And now we can take the tire off just using the ordinary method with spoons. Okay, so these are the Motion Pro rim protectors, which seem to work pretty well. And I like the fact they have this area you can hold them, grip them. If they fall inside the rim, you can get them out a little bit easier. These are about 15 bucks a set of two, so I have two sets. These really are, I think they're worth the money. Now, the whole secret to getting a tire to come off easily is you've got to get the smallest part of the tire into that trough that's in the middle of the rim. And that's why narrow rim tires are difficult. Some are. They're like on the R1, the big wide back rim, the tires go on all automatically almost. These narrower rims, it gets harder and harder. But it's to get that to stay down in and out. For me, the easiest way to do that is I use my knees on, let's say, on 8 o'clock, 4 o'clock, so that holds that down. They also have a thing called, and I wanted to show this, that's helpful on some rims. It's called a dog bone. And you can use this. I want to show this. I don't always use this, to be honest. But we'll give it a try today, and let's see. This holds that. Let me just get it down in there. Okay. And what that does, that's holding that part of the tire is down in there while you have your knees at this point and this point, and then you can pry the tire up. And let's see if I'm right or if I lied. Okay, with one side loose, and again, the Windex or soapy water, whatever, is helping that whole process of getting the tire off. Now we're clean on one side. What I have to do is flip it over, and using some of the Motion Pro things, very carefully again, I'm trying not to scratch the rim. So this is the tool that we're going to be trying to test. It's called the Baha No Pinch. They give you a decent set of instructions, and there are videos on YouTube that are very explanatory about mounting dirt bike tires. I haven't found one mounting, and maybe this is, again, I'm not pretending I know. Maybe it's not going to work. I don't know. So if you take everything out of the box, it's kind of self-explanatory how it works, but it's a good idea to read the directions anyway, and they give you all the internet information. And again, if you're doing dirt bikes, I know this works like a champ. But we want to see if it's going to work on an ordinary street bike tire, and especially one that we know is difficult to mount. So because this is my first time of use, I'm inclined to read the directions. So the first thing they want you to do, now if this is on a dirt bike, you have to raise the rim up. Because a sport bike rim is a lot longer, you really don't have to mount it up. You really don't have to do that. So it fits in there. We also need to find out if, and let's just follow right on the directions, Because they don't want this to be up here. That's the whole problem. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. Now there's a sleeve. I think there's another. Where's the other sleeve? Well, maybe they don't. Maybe you don't need a sleeve for this. This looks like that's going to fit there. Now it's always best the first time you do this to set the tool up, and it's pretty simple, but it's a step-by-step thing. Set it up exactly as the directions show to start with. So the initial setup is by dropping that in, and I see that this would have to be adjusted for each individual, because as I'm going to be doing this, I'm pushing that further forward. We're really only using this tool to get the last, let's say from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock of the tire to jump over the rim. So just to make it clear how this gets set up, the three different, these are the parts that get screwed in, and of course you want to get the one that's the tightest fit. It's then locked in with an Allen screw, and they give you the wrench, and there's three sizes obviously for different manufacturers, but that's got to be a tight fit in there, and this has to sit flat as far down onto the rim as you can get it. Okay, so I've got that part figured out. Now the next part is, as I drop this down, it's a tight fit in there. I want to make sure that's as far down as it'll go. That gives me the right leverage to push the tire down over. And because this is longer, I didn't want to cut it, because maybe this is going to be different for some of the other rims if I decide if this tool is useful for me. What'll happen here is I needed to jack the rim up. Well, I have a handy rim spacer right there. So the next thing is I want to put some lube on the top of the tire and around the bead of the new tire and see if I can drop that on conveniently. This is going to be the moment of truth, and I know we're going to have to make some adjustments here, but that's relatively simple by loosening that screw and moving things around. And I think once I do this once, well, I'll figure out if it's going to be appropriate for me or if it's just good for dirt bikes. Well, we're going to find out. But one thing, if it mounts this tire, it'll mount up an R1 tire in a second. Now, I just want to be sure I document everything here. The tire mounting lube is no more. Again, this is Bob Navola donated this to our cause. I mounted some tires up for him, and this lube seemed to work. But Dawn works, to me, in my estimation, just as good, and so does Windex. But since we have this, let's demonstrate it. We need to, of course, take into account where exactly the balance point is, and Pirellis have a red dot, so that makes that relatively easy. Michelin's don't. Some do and some don't, because Michelin 5s, one had a dot and one didn't. And when I researched that out, they said, the Michelin video says anyway, that they reject tires that need a red dot. So I don't know if that's true, but I thought I'd pass that on, and that is on the Michelin YouTube videos that are out there. So we want to determine the correct rotation of the tire, and of course where the tire valve is going to be. So I wanted to just basically see myself here. Let's get this out of the way. In fact, maybe we shouldn't even have that in there yet. Since this is my first time, I want to find out. I transposed the dot over, so I have that lined up. I want to see. Now normally I do this on the floor. I want to see if this is going to work this way. I guess we're going to find out. So now it's going to get the valves not exactly lined up right there. Okay, so now the whole trick here is, and I've watched the dirt bike videos, and it looks pretty easy with a dirt bike tire. I don't know if it's going to be the same, better, or worse, or what with this. I guess we're going to find out. We've got to get that out. So we've got to hold this down. That lets this slide, get that into position. I wanted to try to show this on a close-up. This, and I don't know, I've just put this at a random spot, but that little tooth is now pushing the tire down. And what you want to do is just do a little bit at a time and don't catch the rim. I guess you could put a piece of blue tape on the rim if you wanted to, but I'm trying to show this as methodically as I can. So the first step is don't let it drop on the rim. Oh, you will pull that up. Okay, so that takes care of getting the bottom on. Now the same thing is going to be, we're just going to try to get this down as far as we can get it. And I don't know if we're going to have to do the same thing, because this is going to, I'm going to have to do a little practice run here to see if that pushes the top on. But this seems like it works on a street bike tire the same as a dirt bike tire. It seems that way so far. Okay, so here's one issue. As you have this tire, it doesn't allow this tire to go back down, so I'm going to have to improvise, figure out some way of doing it, or maybe just, well, we're going to find out. See how this plays out. Because of not being able to get this down, I would assume one of the things would be fine would be some way to jack this up if I knew this ahead of time. Put it up on a milk crate or something. I just don't have one handy. But that's the purpose of making a video, so it might save somebody else a little bit of time and energy or muscle or whatever. Now, I'm just going to try this as a way of doing it. And I'm not totally sure this is the way I want to do it. But since I'm experimenting, now I want to get this, obviously, to go down. Again, sometimes you have to try this 2 or 3 different ways before you figure out the ultimate easy way. And by the way, these Motion Pro things act as giant tire irons. Again, this, I'll figure out a better way of doing this, that's for sure. I have to get this part of the tire down in there, or getting that last part of the pinch, let's call it the pinch, is going to be really difficult. Is how to get that down. I wonder if I can get that. See, what I'm thinking I got to do is get down on the floor and put my knees here. I think that's the most practical way to do this. Okay, so my final opinion, yes, you can use this for sure. What would make it a lot easier, a ton easier, would be, I know the modern tires like the Michelins are a lot easier than the Sport Demons. That's number one. What would make this a ton easier if that tire were out in the bright sun? But we know that from mounting tires for many years. But I did come to the conclusion, yes, you can use this, and it does work. It's a little tricky because you've got to get the tire on to the point, let's say from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and get your knees pressed down in the case of the Sport Demon. Otherwise, and when you start pushing that up with the tool, it wants to start loosening the other side. So what I did, you can look back at the video, I put the dog bone there. That kept it from walking the tire off, and then I just worked it this way. And that seemed to work fine. But hey, it's the first time I used the tool. It definitely works. And that was my objective, to see if you could mount a sport bike tire with the Baha no pinch. And apparently, that's been put to rest. So, of course, the bottom line is there's so many ways to mount tires. This is definitely a helpful thing, and I'll bet this works fabulous on a dirt bike. Or, like on a RD400, where you're dealing with the tube. We're not dealing with a tube, and I think the main advantage of this is you don't have the tire irons going down into where the tube is. So, if we ever have to do dirt bike rims here in the shop, hey, that definitely would be a good tool. Chuck, I appreciate it, and I think I want to get the thing on its Baha no pinch, and we're just going to clean this wheel up and get it ready for the day. We'll wait for a rainy day and get it mounted up. So we'll seat the bead this way, get the compressor fired up, put the valve stem back in, a little bit of Windex around the edge of the rim, get this to seat nicely, and then we'll check for leaks. Okay, just waiting for that magic sound. Pop goes the weasel. Come on, baby, you can do it. Oh, I've been shot, I've been shot. Call the cops. Now what I usually do, I usually put 50 pounds of air in here and then let it sit a minute and then test for leaks. Okay, so we just put a little Windex around this. It's sat for a few minutes now. I can usually feel, if it hasn't seated right, there's a little edge on this. And if I don't see any bubbles in 30 seconds or a minute, I put some down by the Curvy Girl valve. And I don't see anything on that side. Now, because we're not going to install this on the bike today, I'll let this sit in the shop overnight. And whatever air I leave it with, in the morning, it should have exactly the same air. That would be a great leak test right there. And we'll balance this up once we know it doesn't leak. And that Windex, by the way, is the best tip I've run into in a long time. I hope these tips are of some value. It looks like we can use this, but keep in mind, there's so many ways to mount tires, and everybody thinks they know the magic. They all work. as long as you get the tire on and don't scratch the rim, that's the bottom line. Because sometimes you need a heat gun to get these sticky things off. Ah, that one came right off. So we're real close. When it is close, you could spend your whole day trying to balance them, and you didn't add anything. You just moved the little imbalance out. That looks real close. I don't think we're going to have to even try to put any weights on that. That's pretty good. And again, we have the red dot, of course, the Pirelli red dot mounted with the valve. So it was an interesting thing to, using that tool. And again, Chuck, thank you very much. That really, I know, now I know for sure you can make it work on a sport bike. The next time I use it, it'll be a little bit easier. Every time I try one of these things, it just seems like the next time you cut down on the time you need to do it. Super important to get that handle adjusted with nothing showing. It's all in the directions. And I would think mounting the second side of the tire, if you have some way, or a friend that can just hold a tire iron. But that's the same as if you're using spoons. Again, on our channel, we have so many ways of mounting tires. You put my name in quotation marks, and I'll put that up on the screen. And then a tire changing, and pretty easy thing to figure out. Carbon fiber or whatever. We do everything. We try to share everything, and what we can't do yet, we're going to try to learn. So maybe you should post some videos up. And I want to thank the healthcare workers. Thank you guys. I try to not forget to ever be thankful to the guys that have spent over a year now, keeping my family safe. So again, I hope you did enjoy the video, and thank you so much for watching. So if you're new to the channel, I appreciate that you watched the video. We do try to share the information of restoring old motorcycles, doing custom projects, among other things. We've got several full restorations on our channel, several jobs we've done for friends that have turned out to be very nice, polishing jobs, customizing jobs, custom wheels mainly, one of my favorite things, custom made carbon fiber parts, among other stuff. And now we're adding things like testing these tools, the Motion Pro tool, and I'm trying to add that little base of knowledge and share it with everybody. We also share the rides we go on. For this part of the country, it's a very scenic, nice area to ride. We ride all the bikes in our collection as often as possible. And our latest bike, of course, is the MT-09, and that I got for my birthday last year from my bride, Karen. We do evil twins with projects, and we do like hanging out with our friends from time to time. So I hope the information on this video is useful. If you've made some discovery that's worth sharing, please share it on YouTube. And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.